There's a moment in every found footage film where the camera stops being a gimmick and becomes a trap. The person holding it could drop it and run, but they don't because the camera is the only thing giving them distance from what's happening. And if they put it down, they'd have to face it directly. Here's the thing about what most people get wrong with found footage: they think it's a low budget shortcut, a shaky camera, bad acting, jump scares, a format that horror outgrew. What they miss is that found footage is the only horror format that doesn't let you hide. You can't cut away to establish a new shot. You can't zoom out and show the monster in full light. You're locked into one perspective, and that perspective is terrifying, disorienting, and it makes terrible decisions. Here's my list of my favorite 10 found footage films. Now, before I reveal my 10, let me start this all off by saying, first and foremost, that the Blair Witch Project reigns supreme over all of them. I don't care what anybody says, I will defend this hill until I'm not on this earth anymore. But let's get to the top 10. Wreck is the gold standard, and I don't say that lightly. The setup is really simple. A local TV reporter named Angela Vidal is filming a piece about firefighters working the night shift. They get a call to an apartment building. An old woman is screaming, so of course they go inside. The building gets sealed off, and then everyone inside starts dying. What makes Wreck different from other zombie films before it and after is that it never explains anything. There's no scientist character. There's no news broadcast filling the backstory. You just know exactly what Angela knows, which is nothing, and you only learn new information at the same time she does, which is usually too late. The final scene in the penthouse with the night vision camera, if you know, you know. The camera can see something that you can't. And when it finally shows it to you, you wish you hadn't seen it. Noroi is a fake documentary assembled from the footage from a real documentary filmmaker who's disappeared. That framing matters because it's not found footage in the traditional sense. It's footage that was left behind by someone who was putting together a story that never got to finish it. What makes Noroi different is patience. For about the first hour, you're watching a journalist trying to connect the dots. None of these things ever seem to get connected. Then, very slowly, they start making sense. The horror in Noroi isn't what you see, it's in what you realize. The moment the pattern finally becomes visible. Grave Encounters is built on a premise that was already tired in 2011. A ghost hunting reality TV crew locks themselves in an abandoned asylum overnight. What makes Grave Encounters work is that it understands the horror of premise collapsing under its own weight. These people are frauds, and they know that they're frauds. And then the fraud stops being a fraud. The asylum doesn't have just ghosts in there, it has geometry. The hallways rearrange themselves, the exits disappear. Time breaks. Grave Encounters asks a different question. What if the supernatural were real and if it was completely indifferent to whether you believe it or not? The setup is thoroughly modern. A web-based horror channel called Horror Times assembles a team to live stream an investigation of Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital, a real abandoned asylum in South Korea that CNN once called one of the 7 scariest places on Earth. The first hour of this film is almost playful. Then they go deeper into the building to a room that's supposed to be impossible to open, room 402. And then everything shifts. Korean horror has a cruelty to it that American horror rarely touches. It doesn't give you a release, and it doesn't cut away. It holds on to the shot until you break. Scarlett Marlowe is an archaeologist pursuing The Philosopher's Stone. Her research leads her to the catacombs beneath Paris. What sets this film apart is that it's genuinely smart. The catacombs are treated not as a random scary location, but as a psychological architecture, a descent through layers of personal guilt, trauma, and consequence. Because the deeper they go, the more the walls reflect back what each character is running from. Every step deeper is a step further from escape, and every character knows it. Before I reveal my last 5 found footage films, if you like this sort of thing with horror reviews, topics, and recommendations, then do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything that I put out weekly. But here's my other 5.
And what happens if we actually find some evil spirit?
Can you tell us where the church is, Randy?
The first thing you need to know about this film is that it's quiet. It doesn't announce its scares. It doesn't build to crescendos. It lets the dread accumulate in the spaces between words. The ending of Foul Prayer is notorious. And I mean notorious in the way horror fans speak about it with a kind of hush reverence. I won't describe it except to say that it involves a tunnel, a wrong turn, and one of the most unsettling final shots in found footage cinema. What separates found footage from most religious horror is that the investigators are actually competent. They're sincere, and they're just trying to do their jobs. The horror isn't that they make a mistake. The horror is that they did everything right, and that still wasn't enough. Host is 57 minutes long. The entire film takes place during the lockdown. So on paper, that shouldn't work. In practice, it's one of the most innovative found footage films in the last decade. What makes Host work is that it understands the grammar of video calls the way traditional found footage understands handheld cameras. The lag, the frozen frames, the background that changes when someone isn't looking. The part that stays with you isn't any single scare. It's just the isolation of the whole thing. Every character is alone in their own apartment, which means distance isn't safety, it's helplessness. If you're a subscriber to my channel, then you know that I work in the haunted attraction industry, and I also build and own escape rooms. So when I tell you that Hell House LLC is one of the most authentic depictions of haunt design I have seen in a horror film, and also the most terrifying, I want you to understand that I'm not speaking as a reviewer. I'm speaking as someone who knows what it's like when a staged environment becomes something else. The genius of Hell House LLC is that it gives you the behind-the-scenes world of haunt design, the animatronics, the light rigs, the makeup stations, and then slowly, methodically corrupts it. The clown mannequin in this film, which is just a prop, just a cheap plastic mannequin in the basement, is one of the most effective antagonists that I have ever seen, because it doesn't move fast. It doesn't even speak. It just changes position. Here's what separates the Poughkeepsie tapes from everything else on this list, is that it's not supernatural. There is no ghost, there's no demon, there's no cursed location. The horror is entirely human. One person's methodical, documented destruction of other people. The film was so disturbing to test audiences that its release was delayed for years. The scariest scene isn't even a murder. It's an interview with the survivor, a woman the killer kept alive, speaking directly into the camera about what he took from her. She's not screaming and she's not crying. She's just describing. And the description is worse than any image. I'm ending with Paranormal Activity because it does something no other film on this list attempts, which is it makes your bedroom the threat. Oren Peli shot this film in his own house for $15,000. It went on to gross nearly $200 million. But the budget isn't the story. The story is that Pelly understood something about fear that most horror filmmakers never figure out, which is the scariest place in the world is a place you're supposed to feel the safest. Katie and Micah are a young couple living in a suburban San Diego home. Katie has been haunted, she says, since childhood. Micah buys a camera, not to help and not to protect her, but to document, to capture evidence, because Micah thinks that the camera gives him control over something he doesn't understand, and he needs to be right to show that he is stronger and his instinct to protect the person he loves. That's the relationship at the center of this film, and it's the relationship that destroys everything. The camera setup is very simple because it's a stationary wide shot of their bedroom while they sleep. Every night, the timestamp appears, and every morning, something has changed. A door moves, a light flickers, footsteps appear in powder on the floor. The film trains you to watch the background, to scan the frame for what moved, to become a surveillance operative in your own viewing experience. And if you were like me during this film, every night I would breathe just a little bit shallower because I was too busy paying attention to what was moving or what sounds was going on. And then I would let out a big exhale the next morning. That's effective. And it works because the bedroom is the most intimate, most private space in everyone's life. It's where you're unconscious, vulnerable, and undefended.
Would you be happier talking with the Ouija board? What is your quest? What is your favorite color?
Paranormal Activity puts a camera there and says, look at what happens when you're asleep. The escalating nights, the footprints, the dragging, the final scene build a pressure that's almost unbearable because the film never lets you leave the house. You're watching the timestamps advance, and you know every night that something is going to be different. You just don't know what. What makes this film also unique is that there are multiple endings to this film. There's the original cut, the Spielberg suggested theatrical ending, and the festival cut. Each one of those lands differently, but all of them share the same final realization, is that the camera was never protecting anyone. It was just witnessing. Well, there you have it. You have 10 films from 7 different countries, and if you've paying attention, you probably noticed something. These films aren't all scary for the same reasons. Rec weaponizes the camera's limits. Noroi weaponizes patience. Grave Encounters and Gogium weaponize space. As Above, So Below weaponized guilt. Final Prayer weaponizes sincerity. Host weaponized isolation, while Hell House LLC weaponizes professional confidence. The Poughkeepsie tapes weaponize documentation, and Paranormal Activity weaponizes the one place you're supposed to feel safe. What that tells you is that found footage isn't a subgenre of horror. It's a delivery system. It takes whatever fear in a culture is most invested in and puts the camera inside it. So what did you think of my 10 found footage films? I know I missed one because there are so many good ones out there. So if I didn't capture yours, drop it in the comments below. So until next time, go check out my other videos. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all your horror content, recommendations, and reviews from me. But more importantly, don't get too scared. Take care, guys.